I am from the Chicago area, from Trinity in Lisle, and which, by the way, you guys are all Lutherans, which is really cool. Lutherans of different tribes, as a friend of mine would say, which I think is also awesome. But I don't get one thing about you guys, okay? Because my guess is most of you are Packer fans, right? And yeah. And so no, you can't be Packer fans and Lutherans, because Lutherans do not believe in a theology of glory. And so you need to be Bear fans, which is the theology of the cross, right? I mean, remember, Jesus said, anyone who would come after me must deny himself, pick up Jay Cutler, and follow me. So that's kind of what we're doing. No, but in all seriousness, Mike asked me to talk with you today and kind of tell the story of Trinity Lisle. And so Trinity Lisle was founded in 1960. It was a group of 4 couples who lived in Lisle who wanted a Missouri Synod Lutheran congregation there. And after some fits and starts, first service a little over 100 people and kind of grew a little bit from there. Then really a period of, from 1970 to 1990, Trinity enjoyed just amazing growth. It was under the leadership of an amazing pastor, a man by the name of Art Beyer. Maybe some of you knew Art or know Art. He's not dead, but he's just not around anymore, so maybe some of you know Art. But just tremendous growth and tremendous blessing. But when I first put that chart up there, what you were probably not looking at was that. You were looking at that. And you were kind of asking the question, okay, what happened? So let me kind of briefly tell you what happened. Really what happened, there were 4 things. First of all, the community in which Trinity is, we're Trinity in Lisle, but we're really part of a larger area that encompasses Naperville, Downers Grove, Woodridge, all very fast-growing suburbs. And by 1990, that growth was about done. So one of the things, quite honestly, that happened, that Trinity stopped enjoying that kind of meteoric growth, was the community was not growing at that same kind of pace. But another thing that happened is they started doing what I refer to as hitting their head on the ceiling. There were some physical barriers that were keeping them from growing. 278 parking spaces in the parking lot. That's it, 278, and it was never going to be more than that because green space laws and things like that, it was not going to get bigger than that. 600-seat worship center. Again, they had made provisions to make it bigger, but if you can't increase the parking, it doesn't make any sense to make your worship center bigger, right? So they were kind of banging their head against those ceilings, and what typically happens, if you're in a church, by the way, that seems to grow a little and then rebound, grow a little and rebound, look for a ceiling. Because what's probably happening is, you bang your head on the ceiling, so you pull back a little bit, then you bang your head on the ceiling again, and it may be that that's what's going on. So they were doing that. They were banging their head on the ceiling. The third thing that was going on is they went through a church split. Without going into a lot of detail, an associate pastor had a disagreement in ministry philosophy with the senior pastor and left, and took about 400 people and started a new independent Lutheran church 2 miles away. We still have folks in our congregation where Brother A worships with us and Brother B worships there. Now, all things work together for good, and God has actually blessed that other congregation. It's growing, doing well. But as you can imagine, that was a very painful experience for Trinity that happened right there in the early 90s. And then the fourth thing that happened was Art retired. And one of the first things I did when I accepted the call to Trinity, I didn't know Art, so he was already down in North Carolina, so I asked him if I could come visit. And I went and I spent a week with Art and Char Beyer, and one of the things that Art said to me was that after that split had happened, the pain of that really, as he put it, took the wind out of his sails for ministry. And so even though he didn't retire for a few more years after that, he wasn't actively leading during that time. And then their plan was to have the weekend after Art retired, the new guy starting the next weekend, and instead they went through a 2.5-year vacancy. So I was the 5th person they called. After I accepted the call, we had kind of a celebration dinner with the call committee, and I thanked them for getting to the bottom of their list for me. And so there was kind of a serious leadership gap for a while. So what I really want to talk about today, though, is that time period. And by the way, I asked a few of my staff if I could practice this on them earlier this week. And by the way, you're going to be glad I did because I was 48 minutes for them. But anyway, so we had to cut some. But But when I put this up, then I put this question up. I said, what did God do? And it was like there was an audible sigh of relief in the room. And I stopped. I said, wait a minute, what was that? What? I could tell something, what was that? And one of them piped up and said, we were worried you were going to put Pastor Schulz arrives on the top of the thing there. but actually, in all honesty, they had started the turnaround before I got there. When you look back, I got there in fall of 2001. It was really early 2000 where that trend started to reverse. So I want to make sure we're clear on something. I've been privileged to be there and be a part of it. But really, God was already doing something among the people there at Trinity. And I'd like to take the rest of my time with you, all 48 minutes of it, to talk a little bit, to talk about what those things were. And originally, this was a picture of somebody holding up 5 fingers. And then when it was 48 minutes long, now it's a picture of someone holding up 3 fingers. And if you want to know what the other 2 are, you can read the description, because I had to cut 2 of the 5 I said in there. But anyway, I want to talk to you about 3 things. You know, as we look back on this time at Trinity, and Trinity's been blessed. Now we're worshiping a little over 1,200 on a weekend. We're at 2 locations, just started the 3rd location, and probably a 4th by a year from now. We're working on that, and I'll share a little bit about that later. But as we look back, God was doing some things among us that we believe were really determinative in an organization that really had started kind of a death curve getting turned around. And so that's what I want to share with you in the rest of the time today. So first of all, the first one of those things we would say is empowered lay leadership. And I want to talk to you about these passages from Ephesians just a little bit. Paul he's writing to the church, and by the way, I think the best book in the Bible you can study if you want to talk about the church, if you want to study the theology of the church, I believe is the book of Ephesians. And so in Ephesians, in chapter 4, Paul, in verse 11, he talks about God has given gifts to the church. You remember that? And he lists 5 of them, or 4 of them, depending on whether you think the last 2 are actually the same thing. He says apostles, prophets, evangelisms, shepherds or pastors, and teachers, right? And then he says this. He says those gifts given to the church, if you will, the kind of first century church worker roster, okay? He says their purpose, the reason God gave them to the church is to, and this translation that I use here is to equip God's people to serve, okay? Now, some translations actually take the word serve, and they are bold enough to put the word for ministry there, because that's the word. It's the ministry word. And so Paul says that professional church workers have been given by God to the church to equip God's people to do the ministry. Now, by the way, I recognize that at least in Missouri Synod circles, there's some controversy about what I just said. There are some that would suggest there should be a comma after people. They would say it should be their purpose, these pastors, teachers, apostles, is to equip God's people, comma, and to serve, comma. In other words, in that, if you put the comma in there, who's doing the ministry? The pastors and the teachers are, right? Now, by the way, if in all due respect, if any of you in the room believe there should be a comma there, I think it's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard, and here's why. First of all, by the way, when I say with all due respect, I never mean it. But anyway, so actually, my good friend Jeff Schrank at Christ in Phoenix says that. He says, I in all due respect, I don't really mean that. But anyway, and he'll go on. Anyway, but seriously, first of all, just the Greek doesn't support it. If you look at the prepositions, it just doesn't support that a comma should be there. So it should be end of story there. But I cannot find a single early church father that said anything that would suggest there's a comma there. Not a one. In fact, the first inkling I can find in any theologian suggesting that there should be a comma there, that it's actually, Paul was trying to say that it's the pastors and teachers' job to do the ministry, is like the 18th century. So for the first 1,800 years of the New Testament church, no one even suggested that Paul was saying anything other than, pastors, it's your job to equip God's people to do ministry. And if that wasn't enough of a problem, verse 16 just kind of nails it home. Look at what verse 16 really says. And this, by the way, has kind of become kind of a rallying cry for our church. It's a verse, probably 9 out of 10 people, if you asked them on a Sunday morning, could tell you that this verse. They know this verse. it says this, and this is God's Word translation, which I love the way it still makes Jesus the one that makes the body grow. It says it really well. But look at what it says. It says, as each and every part, now remember, he's talking about the whole church, the whole body of Christ. He says, as each and every part does its job, one translation says, does its own unique work. Think about that for a minute. What it's saying is, every single person in your church is there for a reason. They have a unique job, a unique role to play in your ministry. And they might not know what it is. You might not know what it is. There may be some people, oh, by the way, if right now you're thinking, I think everybody has got one. And maybe you're the one that doesn't. But anyway, do you ever hear that thing about small groups? They say every small group has that one person that needs extra grace. And if you can't think of who it is, it's you. Sometimes I've had people say, yeah, I can think of a lot of people, but maybe they think, anyway. So as each part does its unique work, its unique job, that's God, no mistaking, God is the one that makes the body grow. Let's not give ourselves too much credit here. But he makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. Now, folks, I don't know why God tied the effectiveness of his ministry to us. But he did. I mean, if it was me, I would have said, you guys just sit down and relax. I can do this a lot better than you, right? But for some reason, God has tied the effectiveness of his saving work, his ministry in this world, to not only us, pastors and teachers or full-time church workers, but to the people we serve as well, to God's people. Somebody said it this way the other day, and I think it's brilliant. And he said, Walther said this. I got to find this, okay? But he said, Walther said that when you were baptized, you were ordained into the ministry of Jesus Christ. Wow. So one of the questions I think we constantly have to be asking ourselves as churches is, are we releasing the gifts? Are we giving permission to the gifts? Are we creating an environment in which the gifts that people have in our ministries can be used and flourished? And when we look at things like the charts that you put up there before, those kind of declining numbers that we're all looking at in our denominations, right? When we look at those, could the answer be as simple as we're not paying attention to verse 16 in Ephesians 4? Could it just be as simple as that? That the reason God is not making the body grow so that it builds itself up in love is because we are not letting each and every part do their unique work. So thanks be to God at Trinity, we have a culture of really trying to turn loose lay people to do the work that God has called them to do. And we ask this question all the time. We say, is this something that only a pastor can do? And if it is, we better make sure a pastor is doing it. And if not, then let's find out who God has gifted to do it. Like, for example, I can't find anywhere in the Bible where it says pastors have to do marriage counseling. I don't find that anywhere in the Bible. One of the things I have learned is I suck at marriage counseling. I am like the world's worst marriage counselor. Couples will come to me and they'll tell me what's going on, and I instantly see the problem. And I look at them and I go, just stop doing that. Jeez, what's wrong with you people? Not exactly what they need, okay? So why in the world would I want to do marriage counseling? Just because the people expect me to? Actually, we have 4 people in our congregation I know of that are amazing marriage counselors. So let's get people to them. So Trinity has this culture of turning people loose in ministry. And so most of the hiring, for example, we do comes from within the congregation. There are people that were taken from small volunteer roles and were given larger volunteer roles and bigger roles until eventually we had to start paying them, you know. One of the things that's been a real blessing for Trinity in recent years, I was going to tell you this, yeah. We believe that every gift you need to do the ministry is already sitting in your pews. You may need to wake them up, right? But seriously, we really do believe that God has provided you in your congregation already all the gifts that you need to do the ministry He's calling you to do. Now, every once in a while, God will send you somebody new from the outside, or you won't have a gift there, and He's ready to provide it from outside. But for the most part, the vast majority of times, the gifts that we need are already there and sitting in the pews. We just have to turn them loose. One of the things that in our synod has been a real gift for us in the last few years is something called the Specific Ministry Pastor Program, which is a way for people to stay in ministry in your congregation and become ordained. to get their ordination training by extension while they stay in ministry. And these are two of my associate pastors right now. One is Dennis Franzen. He was a part-time volunteer in our prayer ministry, had been a part of our church for many years, had been a CFO from a bank, and when he retired, he wanted to do prayer ministry, and so he started prayer ministry in our church. Eventually, we started giving him a little stipend for doing that. And when we were looking for a new pastor for one of our sites, and I'm going to tell you that multi-site story in a little bit, I didn't know who that person was going to be. And so we thought, well, maybe God is telling us we should, get somebody from outside. And so I was actually doing interviews with new graduates from the seminary, or people that were going to graduate. And everyone I was talking to, I found myself comparing them to Dennis. And I found them saying, ooh, Dennis would have said this. So finally went to Dennis. I said, Den, I think maybe I told him that story. I said, I think God's trying to tell you something. I think you're supposed to go to the seminary in full-time ministry. He's 58 at the time. And he's like, I don't think God's telling me that, And I said, well, you do me a favor. I knew he was going on vacation the next week. I said, will you just pray about it while you're on vacation? Thursday afternoon, I get a phone call from Den. He said, gosh darn it. I think God's telling me I need to do this. And so Den was ordained 2 years ago in January through our SMP program, and it's just an incredible blessing. The other guy is Dan Grissom. Dan is the site pastor at our other location. Dan was a lobbyist for Amico for many years, and was very involved in our small group ministry. And at one point, we needed somebody new to lead that small group ministry, and they asked Dan to come on staff. And Dan was actually on staff for 15 years, full-time in that ministry. And again, Dan was the right guy to be that pastor for the new site. And thank God that we had a way in our denomination that he could get ordained so he could do Word and Sacrament ministry there in that setting. Neither one of these guys would have gone to seminary if they had to do what I did, and that was, quit their jobs, sell their house, and move to St. Louis for a few years. Now, why am I telling you about that if I just made the big case that it's not their job to do ministry now that they're ordained? Here's why. Because one of the things we've noticed is when you do something like that, when you take people that have sat in the pews next to people year after year after year, and you let them step up into that kind of role, what it says to the other person sitting there is, okay, God's not calling me to be a pastor, but if Dan can do that, then maybe I can do this. And we describe it this way, and it's a little crass, I apologize, but we say at Trinity, leadership sucks. And what we mean by that is when you step somebody up into a higher leadership role, it creates a vacuum behind them, and it sucks new people into involvement. One last thing I'd say about that is I'd also challenge you to think about empowering leadership and make sure that you are not neglecting the youth and the women in your congregation. Yeah, amen. My wife made me say that. No. And I don't know what that means for your context, and I could tell you a little bit more about that when I'm not being recorded later. No, kidding. Not really. I could tell you a little bit more about that, what it meant in our context. But in your context, I'd ask you to really seriously think, are you doing things consciously or unconsciously that are sending signals to the women or the youth in your congregation that their leadership really isn't quite as valued as it would have been if they were male? About 8 years ago, I was worried that was happening in our church, and so I sat down with a group of about 25 women from the congregation, and I just asked them that question. And there was this little part of me that was hoping and praying and maybe thinking that they would say, no, you guys are awesome here. This is great. It's a great church. 2 hours later, I got an earful, and I'm really glad I did, because that helped change our culture too, because they were very open and very honest with me, and they said, when this happens in our church, you don't think it's saying that, but what it's saying to us is our leadership isn't really valued. And so think about that. Are there ways that you are preventing women and youth from serving? We have youth serve in all kinds of areas. Here's one thing I'm really proud of, and I had, again, nothing to do with this. God did it, and some of our folks did it, and it's awesome. Our confirmation ministry happens on Wednesday nights, and so this is junior high, 6th through 8th grade. 27 of the people that lead in that confirmation ministry are senior high kids. And I'm not just saying they're like assistant leaders to the adults. They're leading our confirmation ministry, and they're doing an awesome job. And in fact, a couple of weeks ago, I was talking with one of those kids, and he told me, he said, Pastor, I would quit the football team. I would give up. He's going through the list of stuff he did at school. He said, I would quit all that before I'd quit doing Lighthouse on Wednesday nights. That's how important it was to him. So are there ways that you are, let's put it in a positive, are there new opportunities that you could find to encourage the leadership of youth and women in your congregation, because they are part of the body and God has given them gifts to use as well? So empowered lay leadership was one of the key things as we look back that kind of turn things around. The next one I throw out for you is something called holy discontent. Bill Hybels kind of coined this phrase, but quite frankly, it doesn't come from Bill Hybels, it comes from the prophets. And the prophets are people that see the world through God's eyes and see what it should be and are just not going to rest until something changes. And so we needed some holy discontent at Trinity. We had been licking our wounds for too many years. And so we started asking this question. We said, if our church were to disappear from Lisle tomorrow, would anyone accept our members' care? And that's a hard question to ask and to answer honestly. And we were afraid the answer to that was no one would care, no one would even notice. So one of the things we did is we sent a camera crew across the street. Right across the street from our church is a golf course, which is why I took the call. And so we sent a camera crew across the street to the golf course in the parking lot, and we said, ask people 2 questions. Have you heard of Trinity Lutheran Church? And if so, do you know where it is? Just those 2 questions. That's all you're going to ask them. And make sure in the camera shot you can see our church in the background, okay? And we did it there in the golf course parking lot, and then we also sent the crew to the local train station where people were, again, very close to our church, and this was part of the result.
I'd like to know if you've ever heard of Trinity Lutheran Church.
Trinity Lutheran Church, it sounds familiar.
Yeah?
Yeah, where's it located?
All right. We just like to know if you've heard of Trinity Lutheran Church.
I have not.
Have not?
No. Have not.
Have not.
Have not.
Okay. We just want to ask you one question. If you've ever heard of Trinity Lutheran Church.
Yes.
You have.
I don't know where it is.
Have you ever heard of Trinity Lutheran Church?
No.
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 Trinity Lutheran Church in Lisle.
I've heard of Trinity Lutheran. I don't know where it's at in Lisle.
Trinity Lutheran Church in Lisle, Illinois.
No.
Church? No, I'm not. You've not.
No.
No, I have not.
No, I haven't.
I'd like to know if you've ever heard of Trinity Lutheran Church in Lisle.
No, I've not.
You've not.
I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Lutheran Church in Lisle.
I have not.
You have not.
Nope.
I assume it's a Lutheran church.
Yeah, very perceptive. Thank you very
All
much.
right, so we used that video in worship. Actually, that's the short version. The video we used went on for 4 minutes, and we had to hardly edit anybody out. And, there's our church right there. And it started kind of like it did in this room. Everybody started laughing at first, but after about a minute, it got quiet. By the end of 4 minutes, there was holy discontent in the room. People still talk about that video as being kind of a transforming moment for our church where we went, that is not okay. That's just not okay. We got to figure that out. And it was that led to us to do things like free clinics that we do that invite people from the community that need health care to come on a weekend, and we have doctors that volunteer, although Obamacare is going to make that all useless, I guess. Not. So that sense of holy discontent, and if you're a leader in the church, here's the challenge for that. You've got to get people to have that sense of holy discontent without totally killing their enthusiasm for the ministry. It's a delicate balance, isn't it? You've got to help them understand there's something wrong that has to get fixed, but that doesn't mean that we're broken and unfixable. Or you've got to make sure you don't kill the little bit of ministry momentum you might have, but at the same time create in people that sense of what we're doing now is not okay. Something new has to happen. So then the third thing I'd talk to you about is you've got to be ready sometimes to make a leap. We were just talking at our table a little bit before. Incremental growth, incremental change will only lead to incremental growth at best. It may be incremental change will just keep you treading water. And sometimes, when you look at the Bible, God didn't call them to addition growth. He called them to multiplication growth, right? And so there are times in ministry where you've got to be ready to just take a leap. You've got to do it trusting that you may fail sometimes, and that's okay. That God is going to be there to pick you up and give you another chance to leap. But you've got to sometimes take that bold leap and not quite knowing how you're going to land when it happens. For us, that meant one of the things that we needed to do to solve the bumping our head up against the ceiling problem is we needed to become a multi-site ministry. This is was our only campus in the early 2000s. It's a wonderful facility. It's a beautiful worship center. Seats about 600, as I said. It's modern. It was great. One challenge we had is we have two very different styles of worship. We have contemporary and traditional, and the contemporary did not work acoustically very well in this room. So we were facing that challenge and trying to figure it out. And finally, we believed what God was saying to us is, you got to do a new site. And we tried the first time and failed miserably, by the way. And everybody that didn't think it was a good idea went, okay, good, we're done with that multi-site crud now, okay? But we were like, no, we really believe that's what God is calling us to do. And so for us, what this meant was asking half of our congregation to move to a new location. And so that's what we did. We rented a 25,000 square foot piece of real estate in a strip mall about 2.5 miles away from our other location. It was a former Walgreens and video store. We moved all of our contemporary services to that location, and we built that location customized for contemporary worship. So basically, one Sunday morning, we asked half of our congregation to go to a different place for worship. And there was a huge amount of fear, by the way. I had people the week before coming up to me, Mark, what if nobody goes to the new site? It's going to be horrible. We spent all that money and time, and no one's going to go there. And I had people walk up to me 2 minutes later, Mark, what if everybody goes to the new site? Nobody's going to be here, you know. The first weekend, we were worshiping about 800 in worship on a weekend. The first weekend, we had 466 people at the new site and 465 at our original site. I was like going, yes, it's awesome. It was great. I think you've got to look for that God moment, though, that tells you it's time to leap. And here was the God moment for us. My first weekend at Trinity, I preached a sermon about this guy, Eeyore. A small son at the time, and here's the story. Eeyore, or one day, Winnie the Pooh and his friends are playing this game called Pooh Sticks. And it's really hard to tell the story with you standing right there waiting. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, so they're playing this game called Pooh Sticks, and you play Pooh Sticks. You go on a bridge over the river, and you go to the upriver side, and you each throw a stick in the water, and then you run to the downriver side, and whoever stick comes out first, they win. So they're playing this game. They throw their sticks and they run. Out comes no stick, but Eeyore on his back, all fours up in the air. And Winnie the Pooh says, Eeyore, what are you doing? He goes, I'm blowing the story because I can't do it fast. All right. Winnie the Pooh says, Eeyore, I didn't know you were playing. He said, I'm not. And he said, well, what are you doing? Are you out for a swim? And he said, no. He said, well, what are you doing? He said, I'm just waiting for somebody to rescue me. And so I told that story. I said, every day people float into your lives just waiting for someone to rescue them. And that kind of the folklore of our church. We have an Eeyore in our worship center that moves around, and everybody's always looking for him. We talk about Eeyore all the time. We tell the story at new member classes. You know, that idea that our job is to be looking every day for those people just floating into our lives, just waiting for somebody to rescue them with the love of Jesus. So it's the week of the new site. And some people from our church bring this woman up to me, and they're so excited for me to meet her. She lives in the apartment building next door. She and her husband haven't been to church in like 30-some years, but they always said if there was a church they could walk to, they would go. And now we're there. So they show up the first Sunday, and she's in tears, and as she's turning and walking away from me, she had Eeyore on the back of her shirt. It was so cool. It was kind of like God was saying, yep, you did the right thing. So thanks for letting me tell the extra story. Thanks, guys.